Hi, I'm Judy Green. I am a leadership contestant from Clementsport, Nova Scotia, which is in Mi'kma'ki, which is the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq here in Nova Scotia, a tiny little town called Clementsport. And I am just so excited to be hosting everybody from the party from across the country, and really liking some of the positive things that we're getting out of COVID-19, which is having the ability to connect with so many people. And tonight I am so excited to welcome Elizabeth May, the parliamentary leader and past leader of the Green Party of Canada. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us here today.
Oh, I'm happy to join. And as some of you will know, in this leadership contest, it's really hard to do because I like the candidates so much. And so when I say positive things, people say, well, how do you say you're neutral when you say Judy's a great candidate? I am neutral. I'm not endorsing anyone. But the party leadership contest committee did authorize and actually approached me to do this, which is to assist with fundraising for candidates who fall in a category of being underrepresented, is the term the leadership contest committee used. So I'm happy to be here to support Judy's needs to make sure she crosses that finish line and gets her name on the ballot, which we'll all be receiving. Some basic things about the leadership contest, just to reiterate. I think a lot of you know this. You've heard it before. I know a lot of the people on this call already have heard this, but of course, you have to make sure your membership is up to date on September 3rd to be eligible to vote in our leadership race. And that is also for people who've been lapsed members. Make sure you're back up to speed. Underrepresented question, good question, Dave Woodbury. That question is really for the leadership contest committee. They'd originally chosen the words equity seeking group, but underrepresented is basically when you look at Parliament, it's full of, especially it used to be completely full of white men. It's now mostly full of white men. So the groups that are underrepresented are women, people of color, Indigenous people, people from the LGBTQ spirit plus community. Generally seen, and that's the decision making of candidates. Just the mechanics of this, not to waste too much time on it, but the mechanics of it are that any one of the 9 or 10 candidates, originally it was 10, now it's 9, could approach the leadership contest committee and say, these are the reasons that I think I am underrepresented in politics in Canada, and therefore we request that you allow the former leader to help you with fundraising. So this has happened now in a couple of cases, and some who are clearly in an say they want my help, but not with the fundraising, just in a room, and have a bit of a mix of both. But that's up to the candidates and the leadership contest committee. And I just try not to get myself in too much trouble saying how many positive things I want to say about the great candidates we have running for leader. So that's just by way of introduction for tonight. And again, the rough outlines, we really want our members to reach out and ask friends, neighbors, kids, people that you think you've canvassed with them, they've been working with the Green Party, but did they take out their membership? Maybe you've got friends who are monthly donors and assume they're members. Double check is the best rule, because sometimes people are quite sure they must be members. They've been giving donations to the Green Party forever. And then the folks in the national office say, no, we don't have you down as a member, and you're too late now to join. So we really want to encourage you to double check with your friends. Go online yourself and make sure you're a member, because voting will really matter, and strong voter turnout will matter. We tend, it's a leadership race. It really, really matters that all of our members vote. And of course, our ballot is a preferential ballot. You don't have to only vote for one candidate. You can vote for everybody. Or you can decide you're going to vote for your top picks and then write none of the above. Lots of ways of voting preferentially. The main thing is you have a really good option to say, I like so many of these candidates. And that's another thing about the donations. I'll just cover that off quickly because we'll come back to it later. Because this is a leadership year, Elections Canada rules about donations have changed. So if you're a Green Party member or not a member, if you just want to support the party and you'll never, some people give us money and don't vote for us. I don't understand that. But anyway, you can donate legally $1,625 to the National Party. And as well, you can donate $1,625 to your local electoral district association or any combination of electoral district associations from across Canada, as long as the total is $1,625. And 3 times you can do $1,625 because it's a leadership race. You can donate to one candidate, $1,625, or a collection of candidates to a total of $1,625. So I know a lot of you on this call don't have the kind of money, not looking at anyone in particular, to donate 3 times $1,625. But this year, legally, you can do that. So that's why for Judy's campaign, and why did we create this business that they asked me to help? Well, this is the first time we've had a leadership race with a significant financial hurdle. When I ran for leader 14 years ago, I had to come up with $1,000, right? So now, and Judy's reminding me, nominating. Yes, signing the nomination papers, very helpful because those names have to come from across the country too. So anyway, when I ran for leader, we started the leadership race. We had 3,000 members. By the end of the leadership race, we had 6,000 members. And I think my whole leadership, including traveling across the country and doing debates and things, which we can't really do during COVID, I think the whole cost of my campaign came to something less than the hurdle that the candidates have now to give to the party. I'm sure I didn't spend $30,000 in 2006 to run for leader, and I didn't have to give the party more than $1,000. The party rules are now you have to provide $30,000 that goes just to the party. And any of your own expenses on top of that, that's fundraising on top of the 30. So that's why they came up with this idea that I would help any candidate from an underrepresented group. That's the background, and that's way too much for me on background. Back over to you. By the way, Judy Green, if you don't know her, I should say, terrific candidate, ran in West Nova, in Nova Scotia, my old stomping grounds, and did better than any candidate we have ever had in that riding. We had only 49 candidates across Canada break the 10% line. By the way, when I ran for leader in 2006, we'd only had one person ever hit 10%. This election, we had 49 candidates above 10% of the popular vote in their own EDA. Judy was one of them, and it's a very impressive first time out. And we can't say enough about how she has the perfect last name. It all gets very easy from there. I'm going to shut up and turn it back over to Judy.
I'm having mousing issues here. Yes, thank you for that. It's actually really funny because I was doing a talk on climate change, and I had somebody ask me if my last name Green was a stage name. and I actually my all I could think of, it was the first time I'd been asked, all I could think of was after 38 years of marriage, I think I've earned it. That one came from my husband. So it's been quite an interesting run. We actually came in third and we won the student vote. I'm inordinately pleased that we won the student vote in West Nova, because the youth are the future, and they know the direction we need to go in because of climate change. And we need to be listening to them. And they go home and they talk to their parents and their family members. So it's really important that we get everybody on board with this challenge that is in front of all of us. Krista is putting information in the chat. If you haven't clicked on your little button there to see where the chat is, she's also got links there to be able to donate directly if you like. We will be asking for pledges later in this evening, but if you want to just donate quietly, that's awesome. But please let us know so that we know to follow up. We don't know to follow up, and sometimes there's a lot. With 9 contestants, you can imagine our staff are run off their feet trying to keep track of everything, and sometimes things slip through the cracks. So we just want to make sure that donations go where they're intended. Thank you very much. For those of you on the call who may not know who I am, there's so much information out there now. What I recommend that you do, if you go to my website, judyngreen.com, there is a videos page and links to YouTube. We have a ton of videos out now. We actually have some introductions en français, as I am working hard to improve my French language skills. And do remember, I'm a beginner. We all have to start somewhere, and that first step is sometimes the hardest and scariest step to take. And I certainly can appreciate how native French speakers in Quebec feel when they're in a place where they have to speak French and that's not their first language. So it kind of works in both directions. It's yes, and Elizabeth is just mentioning that you're in territory of
It's
Wassanek.
WSÁNEĆ. It's interesting. WSÁNEĆ. It's one of the Coast Salish nations. Those on the call from this area, Megan will certainly know WSÁNEĆ. Carol and Herbert used to live in this area and has since moved to Ottawa, looking around to see who else is here in BC. I know David's in PEI, Chai is in Toronto, or at least he used to be. Silverado is, I think you're down in Kelowna. Am I right where you are? Right? I know you're somewhere in BC.
She's in Summerland recently. That's where I did my high school. I did high school in Summerland.
And I know James is in Regina. I hope Casey is home and we get a guest appearance from Casey. Always cheers me up. So what I wanted to say about WSÁNEĆ territory, which is kind of interesting, is the name of my riding is Saanich Gulf Islands. Saanich is an anglicized mispronunciation of WSÁNEĆ. So I am very, very honored and privileged to be in a nation-to-nation relationship with 4 First Nations within Saanich Gulf Islands. And interestingly, of course, that means I relate, they're my constituents, but of course it's nation to nation. So my relationships with chief and council are also government to government. And the WSÁNEĆ people have been extraordinary. The Chief Don Tom of Sartlip First Nation is on the executive of the British Columbia Council of Indian Chiefs, which is a very high position for him to be in. He's also pretty openly a Green supporter, and a member of Sartlip First Nation from that community is my MLA, the current interim leader of the Green Party of British Columbia, Adam Olsen. So we're very honored here, and what Adam always likes to share is that WSÁNEĆ means in Senchothan, which is the language of this area, means the people rising. So they say, no wonder it took the WSÁNEĆ Nation to elect the first Green to Parliament. No wonder we're starting a movement that started in anglicized pronunciation, Saanich Gulf Islands. So that's where I am, and in the tradition of the WSÁNEĆ Nation, I raise my hands to all of you as a sign of respect and say, Haishka Siam. Thank you all for being here, and much respect to you, Judy, as you start this journey to run for leader. Well, you're not even, you've been in it for a while. Running for leader of the Green Party is different now than it was in 2006. So I am going to get to the question that's been floating there for some time from Dave Woodbury. Why did they create these financial obstacles? It was created, it was a set of rules created, and I'm not part of council anymore, except in a sort of honorific way as ex officio. So I wasn't part of creating the rules, but they asked me to help in some ways if we're saying, okay, we really want to focus on equity seeking, we really want to be inclusive. We don't want to create rules that exclude people who are lower income, which is kind of a big deal. So I hope that I'll be able to help Judy raise the money that she needs. Another question to him, and I should know the answer to this, Judy, but I don't. Cheryl's asking if you're willing to share how close you are to the target you need to overcome. If you can share that with us tonight, we'll know. I mean, we can't raise all of it tonight with 21 of us, but we can help.
Absolutely. So we're making steady movement every week. Part of the challenge is that we don't find out until late on Friday. So I really only have my numbers from last Friday, and we still have a long way to go. I said right from the very beginning, fundraising was going to be a challenge for us. West Nova is a riding where half the population's at or below the poverty line, and now we have COVID as well. So it is a challenge, and our approach has been, we're just going to do everything we possibly can, learn as much as we can along the way, connect with EDAs, build those relationships across Canada, and share as much information as we can with EDAs through, as long as we can, stay in this contest. So I will not give up to the very bitter end when I have to say yay or nay. So that's been my approach, because we're getting so much out of the process. It is, I couldn't pay for this education, quite honestly. I really couldn't pay for this education. And me and my team will be using this in upcoming elections as well, and happy to share with everybody. And yes, the receipts do come from GPC itself. That's why the donations have to go through the GPC link. Or if you go to my website at judyandgreen.com and click on donations, there is a file you can download, fill out, attach a check to, and mail to the address on that form. So we're restricted in how we can donate, how we can collect donations as well during this leadership contest. So it's a little more restrictive than we are in a normal general election. And I'm not sure if Elizabeth's mentioned this, but this is a unique year in that you can donate to your maximum donation level of $1,625 3 different ways this year. You can donate $1,625 to the Green Party. You can donate a combination of $1,625 to any combination of EDAs, and you can donate $1,625 to any combination of leadership contestants. So 3 different ways that you can donate this year. So it's kind of
I
unique.
let you say it again because I already said it, but I figure it takes a while. It's complicated. So now, do you want to move to discussing policy? Because we're getting some policy questions.
Absolutely.
Oh, by the way, Andrew Gilmore saying I'd suggest lowering the amount due to COVID. They did lower it. It started out at 50. Yeah. 50. So yeah, and this is federal council decision making. And as I said, I'm not voting on federal council since I stepped down as leader. And of course, you all know the wonderful Joanne Roberts, who's the interim leader, who also hails from both Vancouver Island and Nova Scotia and PEI. She was born in PEI, grew up in Nova Scotia, very rooted in PEI still, and was a very, very tight race in Victoria in 2015 when Joanne nearly won here. Heartbreaker, real squeaker. But anyway, Joanne is the interim leader as the leadership contest goes on. So I'm out there in the past tense, except that I am in Parliament and I will run again. My goal is that we have a good transition and a good succession. Other parties don't do this very well. Most leaders leave at the point that the knives in their back are trailing blood on the floor so badly that they have to go. So, I mean, as you'll notice, think about the other parties. Tom Mulcair was not out there stumping for Jagmeet Singh. If he was, Jagmeet Singh would have run the other way because he knew how Tom Mulcair felt about him. So, you know, to be able to say, I mean, the last time a good succession happened, and I think it may be something about female leadership, but I won't claim too much credit here, but the last time there was good succession in a different party was when Alexa McDonough, who's an old friend of mine from Halifax, when Alexa stepped down, she stayed in Parliament, she kept working, and of course she introduced the country to Jack Layton. So it can be done. But it's mostly like the Chrétien Martin wars. It's mostly like Stephen Harper thought that Andrew Scheer was never mind. And it was Stephen Harper who kind of turned Andrew Scheer's personal finances of his kids being in private school. I mean, Harper was behind exposing all that. Not like they get along very well in succession planning around leaders. So it is unusual to have a former leader trying to welcome and stump for and fundraise for candidates, but I think it will hold us in good stead. Now, Megan, excellent question, and it's a perfect segue into talking about policy. Do you mind if we go to that one, Judy?
No, absolutely.
Megan, you want to unmute yourself and ask the question directly. Why not? We're not controlling their mute buttons, are we? Excellent. Go for it. If people don't know Megan, she's an awesome, awesome volunteer from North Island, Powell River.
Yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot there, Elizabeth. But my question is, I am a little confused. It's nice to see the leadership contestants putting out platforms, but the party leader isn't who creates the party policies. And so I'm confused about why the leadership contestants are putting out platforms.
Yeah, this is actually something that I've been struggling with myself, because I refer to things that I would like to see done that are not currently in policy as being a vision for the party. Because as an educator, I'm concerned about muddying the waters, and our membership are just learning how things work within the party. And it's exactly as you said, Megan, that our policy is created by our membership, and our platform is a subset of that policy, and that's the party platform. And there's nothing wrong with having great ideas and a vision for the party, and I think it's important that we ask those questions of our contestants. But I haven't put out a platform because I don't want it to sound like things that are just a variation or building upon a Green Party policy is the Green Party policy. I wanted to be very, very clear about that the party policy is driven by membership, and that we can all have our own take on it and our spin and our conversations, but the policy is the policy.
I can't say what you started your question. I'm a bit confused about why, Megan. I'm stunned. Anyone who goes out there, and I know I'm neutral, but I have to say this, our Constitution makes it clear. The job of the leader is to be the party's principal spokesperson. We have in the Green Party, in our values for grassroots democracy, our core 6 global green values, and this is true for Greens all around the world. So my colleagues, they're kind of my peer group and support group for therapy, really, because nobody knows Joel I've seen. It's really hard to imagine what it's like to be the leader of a political party and have no power. So, I mean, there's always all this nonsense about, oh, Elizabeth May has too much power and she's trying to control her power thing. Did they read the Constitution? Do they understand? Members determine policy assembled in biannual general conventions. That the membership is the most significant and powerful entity in our Constitution. The leader is principal spokesperson for policies developed by members. Now, sometimes I don't agree with member-driven policy, and I have to say that clearly and say, I'm speaking to this issue, and actually I don't agree with our Green Party policy, because not only we don't have whipped votes where the leader whips other MPs, the leader is allowed to say where we disagree, but we're not allowed to say we're setting policy, we're boldly taking the Greens in another direction. If another leader can, at a biannual general meeting or a special general meeting convened for that purpose, put forward policy changes that are endorsed not only by the members who are in the room that day, but by a subsequent online ratification vote involving all members, then they can play a role in changing the course of the party's position on any issue. But it's not a party that's led by a leader in the sense of a dictator top down, speaking of Harper, which we just did. So it'll be a learning experience for the next leader if somebody gets elected who hasn't familiarized themselves with the Constitution. I mean, I think there's a lot of good content and good substance in all the recommendations that people are making. I'm not for or against them. If the members go there, that's great. I'll be there too. But it's very cool. The only powers the party leader has, and I don't know if you've checked this out, Judy. When you're leader, I like to be positive whenever I'm with candidates. When you're leader, there's 2 things you're allowed to do on your own. You're allowed to pick up to 2 deputy leaders to work with you, and you're allowed to pick who goes on shadow cabinet. When I became leader, the leader didn't pick who went on shadow cabinet. That was council, and somebody, not me, I didn't lead the charge on this or want to do this, but we had members gathered in a BGM decided that should be up to the leader. So that's a bit of a backdrop to our policy development. I will say that right now, because of COVID, we can't meet as we planned to even just a few months ago in Charlottetown, the first weekend of October. We're going to be looking at doing something virtual. Now, to pass policy through this party, you need 90 days notice. You need 60 days notice of when you're going to have a BGM, and you need 30 days before that you're invited to submit policy proposals that then get voted on. So that window has closed. We're going to have, I hope, very soon, following the October announcement of who the leader is, which will be done, and I'm not part of that committee either, but I'm sure Judy knows there's going to be something. Yes, the policy, Cheryl, yes, yep. We are definitely not going to be able to gather in Charlottetown. The rules around 14 days quarantining to go into the Atlantic bubble, we have no confidence that that'll be lifted in time. So to avoid penalties from the hotel, we hope to go to Charlottetown for the next BGM, which would be in 2022. That's not official yet. That's my hope anyway. We hate the fact that we don't get to go to Charlottetown just because of COVID. But you can't hold a convention where people want to come from across the country. They'd have to have at least 3 weeks of holiday available to do that, because you'd have to have 2 weeks of quarantine before you could meet another green at 6 foot distance outside. So you'd have to self-isolate for 14 days before attending the convention. It's just not on. But we do need to have a policy convention, and we're hoping to have it virtual and hoping to have it soon, but that's not decided yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that the member-driven policy is really, really important, and we have to ensure that it happens in a timely manner. One of the things that I would like to see, for us to see as a party, is to really look at having ongoing policy development workshops and processes to teach members how to be involved in creating policy. And so that we have a large number of policies to choose from, and perhaps define a process where we can narrow them down or vet them, and still have a large number of policies going through. There's been a trend over the last few BGMs that fewer and fewer policies are able to be brought to the members. And I would like to see some thought put into how we could, as a party, make that whole process more robust, so that we're not shortchanging on policy amendments, on policy, new policy coming forward. What are your thoughts on that, Elizabeth?
I muted myself. I think that's a great idea, Judy. The more we can engage members, like strengthen the EDAs, engage members at the grassroots level. We just passed in council on Sunday, last weekend, for the first time ever since the council, elected council, will have the right to send a direct email to members. Now, you would have thought that was a no-brainer, but I was allowed, in the 13 years I was leader, I was allowed one time only to send a message in my own voice to members on an urgent issue, once. So I think it's going to be, the more we can do that engages people between BGMs, that lets members know that their opinions really matter, that helps shape policy. So a workshop for practical skills to know how to put forward policy motions is great. I mean, a lot of time Greens love talking policy, of course, but we don't need to have a directive policy on everything, particularly if they're too time limited or too prescriptive. The kind of policy direction we need and as a party is, what do we do with a big picture question like opioids? And we came to the conclusion we need to say that drugs should be decriminalized so that we can get help to people who need it, and treat the drug problem and addiction as a mental health problem, a health emergency, and not a criminal matter. So at that level, that's just the right kind of policy. But then at the prescriptive level of, are we in favor of this safe injection site or that one? We don't need member resolutions on that because it gets too detailed. So knowing how to develop the good high-level policy pieces that we do need, and do it before the next election, which could be soon, is pretty critical.
Mm-hmm. You know what that reminds me of, Elizabeth, is actually writing documentation for software development on large systems. Because if you're too prescriptive in describing what each method, which each object does, then you're constantly spending more time updating your document than you are actually using the software. And so we have to have that flexibility, but still have it's almost like a vision for what that policy needs to be, rather than saying how it's actually going to be implemented. I like that.
Well, one of the things this brings us to is how we make decisions in the Green Party, and I really love to remind everybody that we make, and because I have to remind some council members sometimes who want to revert to Robert's Rules of Order all the time, we make decisions by consensus, and our best decisions are by consensus. So sometimes on various committees, people revert to, well, we need to vote because we can't. Consensus, though, consensus decision making is part of green values, and it's part of our Constitution to follow green rules. So the reason I was reminded of that was David Woodbury's question: what happened to BDS? We went from, it was an experiment, and boy, was it a bad idea. The July 2016 convention in Ottawa, I think it was July, decided to experiment and use Robert's Rules of Order for the convention. So we had a very sudden decision with a room full of, it was on a Sunday morning, we were down to fewer than 100 people on a very close vote. And it was gavelled through without I'd expected we'd take the time to get to consensus. Now, some people say there's some issues that are too tough, you can't get to consensus on them. But I saw Greens at the convention where I was elected leader, and of course I didn't take positions on policies. I didn't say, I'm going to take Canada out of NAFTA, I'll do this, I'll do that. I mean, what I proposed were what I would do as leader. Like, I will stay active between elections. I will hold a lot of press conferences. I will run at my first opportunity in a by-election, those kinds of things. Anyway, the BDS thing, I mean, if I was going to go back to that, I saw some very intractable issues come to consensus at the August 2006 BGM where I was elected leader, and it impressed me all to the get out. So on BDS, which is boycott, divestment, and sanction, we had this up and down Robert's Rules of Order vote, left the room shattered, half the room in tears, half the room celebrating, and no one wanting to talk to each other. Not green, not a good way to make a decision. So we actually restarted the process. We called a special general meeting that was in Calgary, and I think some of you were there, in 2016, December 2016, same year, special meeting. We ended up getting way more people at the Calgary meeting than had attended the original Ottawa convention, but we worked to consensus. There was a ton of work done between August and December, and the elements of boycott, divestment, and sanction that were objectionable were identified. For instance, the Green Party of Israel is very much against BDS. The Green Party of Israel begs us, don't go along with that, because anytime someone says boycott Israel, all it does is strengthen Netanyahu's hand. That's the position I take. I don't want to help Netanyahu. He's a threat to peace. He's a right wing. Well, I think they're right when they call him the crime minister, but never mind. What we want to do is focus on human rights and justice and peace. So what we did was we have a consensus resolution that says the boundaries of the 1967 situation persist. Israel has illegally annexed this territory. They must return it. Palestinians must be liberated from occupation. And if there are products being made in what can be called in shorthand illegal Israel, those areas illegally annexed since 1967, those products should be labeled. So consumers have an option to say, I don't want to buy that. I mean, I stopped buying Nayot shoes, which I loved, because I thought, okay, product of Israel. That must mean there's no sweatshop labor. I don't buy things made in China, so that must be a good place to buy something because they pay good wages in Israel. They don't pay good wages when they're making them in occupied territory. So but you have to do a lot of consumer research to figure this out. So what happened to BDS in a nutshell, David, is we ended up with a consensus position that passed by consensus, with only one member saying no, and then that member said, okay, I'll stand aside to allow consensus to occur. It's one of the bigger successes when we get this thrown in our face that you can't possibly achieve consensus. People are here and here, they're too far apart. Well, if you really work at it and say, okay, well, where's the common ground? Let's build on that. So I don't know, Judy, how do you feel about consensus decision making? I'm keenly aware I'm talking too much.
No, that's okay. Actually, I've had a lot of experience with consensus building. And one of the things that I found is that people, first off, want to be heard. You know, they want to have the opportunity to have their position heard. Not everybody expects to sway everybody to their position, but if you listen to them with respect during the consensus building process, and I really like the green rules of order. You can actually Google that, and it shows you, and you can get to use your red and your green and your yellow cards for voting towards consensus. We do that here in Nova Scotia for the provincial Greens. And it works really well, and we actually get down to the point where we can get pretty darn close to consensus, and it doesn't build hard feelings. It's not about taking staunch hard sides that nobody is moving on. We all start to have a little bit more information that we can you know, compare against the facts that we knew at that point in time and kind of move in that direction. And just like Elizabeth said, you always have to keep your goal in mind. You know, where are we wanting to move with this? What is the goal? Because, you know, with consensus building, you can kind of go off in different directions like you do when you're brainstorming, as it is a kind of a version of brainstorming. And you need to always have bringing back to that focus of what the goal of that policy is or that decision is, and so that everybody has made the commitment to doing their best to get there.
Well, I love I love the term brainstorming is in our area in San Fallons. We had one great volunteer who said, "No, we're greenstorming."
Yes.
So we put all the ideas on a board and said, "Okay, we're greenstorming." But a really good question from Fiona, and welcome to being a CEO of a new EDA. Thank you for taking it on. I can you can I'll just summarize what you've asked, but yeah, EDAs are involved, but the way our policy comes up is really individuals. So I think it's 20 have to sign on to make a policy change. And so they tend to sometimes come from the same region, but not always. So it definitely comes from the grassroots, and we don't have a process of saying, this motion is screened out. That's one of the other bigger parties. Sometimes you'll see something coming towards convention. Actually, that's why Paul George and Adrian Carr, who were early formers of the Green Party of British Columbia, along with my husband back more than 30 years ago. But the thing that drove Adrian Carr and Paul George out of the NDP was that they'd worked for ages to get a resolution into the BC New Democratic Party convention to ban the logging of old growth. And just the night before the convention, they were sure their motion was going to get voted on at convention the next day, and somehow some resolutions committee pulled their motion out, and they said the next day a whole bunch of people sort of patted them on the back and said, "Oh, better luck next year, good try." And they said, "What are we doing with this party?" And they said, "Oh, those Germans, they've formed something called the Green Party. Let's go do that." Okay, Dave, Abby, nice dialogue between two people. We're going to move to questions, but Judy, what was your process here? We've still got a good chunk of time. Do you want to do the fundraising first and then go to questions, so we make sure that Dave, Abby gets questions in here?
I have a little dog here who likes to sing the song for people, so I keep muting myself and then forgetting that it's muted. They've been very, very patient, so let's do these three, and then we'll do our reverse auction. And bear in mind, that's the first time our team has tried to do this. And then we will go on to open questions. How does that sound, Elizabeth?
I didn't see the hands up. I'm just looking to see who the three are that Dave says have hands. Okay, Chai and Maria and Dave. Well, yes. I don't know in what order they went up. Does Krista, were you watching what the queue was in terms of the order?
No, I didn't see which order they came up. Let's just go in alphabetical order. How's that?
There we go. Chai it is. Well, we'll go alphabetical first name. Chai, would you like to ask your question? Let's get you unmuted. Okay, you're on iPhone. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
We can, Chai.
Oh, great. My question is, can you and Elizabeth support progressive gas tax, meaning bigger cars pollute more so they should be taxed more.
Well, I'm fine with that, but I'll support anything our members support. So again, Judy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, we have a few levers in government, and that is incentivizing behavior we want to see and disincentivizing the behavior we don't want to see. And so, pricing, carbon pricing, I don't like to use the word tax. People have this visceral reaction to being taxed. I prefer the term carbon pricing. And yes, that's one of the levers that we have, but we can't just tax people or have carbon pricing when they don't have viable alternatives. Until we can get the price of the electric vehicles down where they're complementary to internal combustion engines, it's disingenuous to be taxing people at high rates or having the carbon pricing at high rates, which is punitive.
No, I'm not saying tax everybody higher rates. I'm saying those who unnecessarily drive big cars should be taxed more. For example, in Toronto, 90% of the people driving the cars, big cars, there are 90% of them, there is only one person in the car. So
Well, and of course,
I would say that 90% of the drivers in Toronto, for example, should be driving a smart car, but they are driving a much bigger cars, and they should not be. They should be discouraged from doing unnecessarily SUVs and 4x4s and all that.
Well, in British Columbia, the way the tax works, and if you're paying a gas tax, sorry, Judy, but in BC, it is a gas tax. And of course, the people who are using more gas pay more taxes because and it has shifted behavior. Those of us who live in BC can attest to this. We see many more electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and tiny little smart cars on our roads here than in other provinces where people aren't paying more for gasoline because of the carbon pricing element. But it's quite true that the shift has to be made available especially for low-income people who don't even own a car. And what really I think is a major crisis across Canada is the absence of decent bus service, particularly for rural and remote communities, and train service. I mean, we used to have,
No,
Judy will
what
remember.
I'm saying, Elizabeth, is we should have a tax which will encourage people to buy smaller cars. Right now, they are buying unnecessarily large cars, and they are paying more if they drive more. I'm saying that you should be paying more even if you buy a big car.
So that would be exactly one thing the government should be doing is phasing out the internal combustion engine altogether. That's green policy. One thing we should be doing is having regulations set on emission standards such that the big polluting cars aren't even available for use. And what we do right now in Canada, which is insane, is that we have corporate average fleet economy standards or CAFE standards for cars that reduce pollution from the internal combustion engine, but don't apply to SUVs and light trucks, which makes no sense. And so much of the market shifts to, so if you look at the statistics on Natural Resources Canada's website, you'll see that the fuel efficiency and the pollution from each car has dramatically decreased over the last number of years, but the amount of pollution has increased because the marketplace has shifted from buying personal cars. More Canadians drive light trucks and SUVs all the time, which is very disheartening. So if we applied even the same regulations, anyway, Chai, we should probably move on to the other questions, but yes?
Yeah, let me just comment on this. I have talked to some ladies who were driving SUVs, and I said, why do you drive an SUV when you have only 2 kids? And their answer was, oh, we have to use it to go to hockey game, or we have to use it when we go to visit our grandmothers. I said, well, come on, you can, for hockey sticks, you can have a carrier on your top instead of having a big car. For visiting your grandmother once, twice, or thrice a year, you can rent a big car for that particular occasion rather than drive a big car all year around to visit grandmother once or twice a year. This is ridiculous the way they think and unnecessarily polluting the planet. Anyway, that's my position.
Well, you know, you're right there, Chai, in that we do have to start looking at the way we think and the choices we make as individuals. And that's just going to take time. It will, as we go forward. I like Dave Woodbury had mentioned in here that in Europe, the registration fees go up according to engine displacement. So how big the engines are, it ends up being higher registration fees.
Judy, registration fee you pay once a year. This gas tank you will pay once a week, every time you fill up, and that's the difference.
Okay, thank you for that, Chai.
I will suggest that even to the Europeans.
Thank
Europeans
you.
are no god. They are the polluters too. They had two world wars there, so they have very little to teach.
There we go. Okay, Dave, Abby, you're up next.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, David.
Well, it's such a dialogue. Two things I want to say. First of all, and Judy will already know about this because she was a recipient of 2 questions from me, which was sent to all candidates, which asked, recognizing that members develop policy, will you commit to running for nomination in one of the 338 ridings in the country? So far, about 4 or 5 of the 9 have responded, all in the affirmative. A couple of them, I think, Judy, you may be one of them, made the point that if all 9 candidates ran for nomination, won their nomination and won their seat, assuming the 3 existing MPs got reelected, we'd have party status.
Yes.
Now, the other thing I want to talk about, and it's kind of interesting because it's going to be counter to what's going to happen later on in this discussion, apparently, is I am toying with the idea of writing a resolution for the next GM whenever it occurs. And it's driven by the fact that in the last federal election, 1 in 3 Canadians didn't vote. And I know in our province, last time was almost 1 in 2 who didn't vote. So I am going to be proposing an incentive to, instead of penalizing people for not voting like they do in Australia, bribing them, and bribing may be a terrible word to use, but bribing people to vote by saying that in a year in which there's a federal election, you will be able to claim on the tax return for that year a refundable tax credit. Part of the problem with the existing system of tax credits is they're all non-refundable. And that's why the so-called Dutch auction that our past leader presents at every BGM and any other event is, to many people, and I'm one of them, a turnoff, because it means absolutely nothing. So I would hope when I draft that resolution, whenever we get asked to start drafting them, that all you wonderful people will sign on to it. I forget how many you need for it to go forward, whatever number it is. And that we quit emphasizing these non-refundable tax credits, because I don't know what the average income of Green Party members are, but I suspect a lot of them are, particularly those of us who are getting older in years, are below where we have to pay any tax. And so those credits mean absolutely nothing. And I did make one donation to Judy's campaign, just so you know, even though there is no benefit to me.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. This is something that we dealt with in our last election as well, because as I mentioned, in West Nova, half the population's at or below the poverty line, so they're not paying taxes. So when they donate, like I have people who donate regularly when they get their HST checks, you know, and they really can't afford that, but they believe in what we're doing here in the riding, and they will do that. And I really want to be part of making it equitable for them, because why is their donation penalized when other people who have higher income are not being penalized? It's like another tax for being poor. It annoys me. It's not equitable, and it needs to change. So if you're looking for signatories, I'm quite interested in what you're talking about.
Yeah, and me too. And really, the reality of fundraising, and I know, Dave, that you don't like it, but at least when we do an event like that, I mean, everybody's involved and it's fun. If I'm going to gripe about Green Party fundraising, it's the emails. I can't stand all the emails asking for money. And that's why, by the way, the council doesn't control the email list, the little gripe I mentioned earlier. And this is changing. I'm really excited about it. But the party staff that does the emails is focused on fundraising. And I want us to be focused on communication. I want us to be focused on But again, the leader isn't in charge. This takes governance changes within the council. They just passed a very important motion last Sunday to say that the council will be getting the ability to send messages directly to members, and the EDAs will be able to write directly to their members. That's or no, maybe I've got that wrong, but at least the members of council who represent regions. And this was one of Dave's concerns. Dave got out there as Saskatchewan rep and got the ability to contact people on his own. But really, communication is so important in this party, because we're not just a political party, we're a movement. We want to get it right. We want to have everybody feel included, and we don't want to create divisions along some people have money and some people don't. The reality is a lot of Greens have enough money to benefit from the $400 mark, is where it costs you $100 to donate $400. And I work with a lot of charities. I always have. You know, I donate to my local church. All of the other charities in Canada don't have anything like a 75% rebate deal, right? It's because politicians wrote the rules to benefit their own parties, and I think we should really have 100% public funding for political parties, and we should not have parties that can raise more money, get to buy more TV airtime, and drive us crazy with attack ads. I think it should all be on the basis of public service announcements, not advertising, and really a level playing field with fair voting. We haven't mentioned the importance of proportional representation, but it's absolutely critical if we're going to keep this country safe from something as horrible as a Canadian version of Donald Trump, who could get in with a minority of public support, but winning the majority of seats. A majority government in this country the Prime Minister has all the power, and it's very frightening. And we really do need to keep pushing and pushing for fair voting, not because it helps Greens, but because it protects democracy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, exactly. And there is, you know, multiple steps along the path to having publicly funded elections, which would be the end goal. So that we have to keep our eye on the prize, as it were. Excellent.
And that last question was to Maria, was it? Did Maria have her hand up?
Yep, okay. Maria Rodriguez. You're unmuted, Maria.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I want to go back to the connection between the policy process, the candidates or the contestant publishing quote unquote platforms, and connect that with the workshop idea that Judy presented to build capacity in the membership. And sorry, this is gonna sound a little disjointed because English is not my first language, and maybe the question is a bit complicated, but here is what I think. The contestant presenting their policy ideas, these are their personal opinions rather than party policy, because party policy comes from the membership, right? But at the same time, there is a need for us, the voters or the members, to hear the differences of opinion that exist. And as long as it is clear that this is the contestant view, I think that's okay. But there's another wrinkle to this, which is that in the recent changes that were made or clarifications that were made to the policy development process or the motion development process, this idea that policies can be, or must be at the very high level, I think that it's being overinterpreted by some people. And it's overinterpreted to the point that it's causing divisions in the party. Because some people are thinking that what that means is that there's a bunch of motherhood statements, and when you have the 10 motherhood statements, you have nothing else for the members to say. And it's been presented that way. And then because policy is a course of action that you are proposing, then maybe some people are proposing too many course of action because they think that the way the process is presented doesn't allow for that. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not sure if I'm expressing myself correctly. But going back to my question, because I said I'm going to ask this question to every single contestant, you know this because it's been following the thread, and you're just not the last one or the first one. These divisions in the party have a lot to do with this aspect of the grassroots policy. And if elected as leader, Judy, what would you do in order to heal these divisions, to address all these misunderstandings, and to arrive at a common and consensual interpretation of this, what grassroots policy means? And of course, what you mentioned about the workshops, I think is great, but what else? How would you approach this problem, which is very real and has become very evident lately?
It is. There's a couple of problems that I see. One is that somebody new coming into the party, or even someone who's been in the party for a while, may not even know how to get involved in policy creation processes. So we need to make those roadmaps into how to be active within the party in all the different ways that members can do. We need to make those clearer. We need to be providing opportunities for members to come together in that messy brainstorming or greenstorming, where all the ideas are thrown out there, and then you throw them up on the board, and then you start to make sense of them. And that's kind of partly what the policy workshops would look like, but they would all be coming into it not from scratch, but having a fairly fleshed out policy. And in that process, you know, I think we have this really bad tendency as human beings to want to whitewash everything with the same brush. And some policies you can be quite high level on, but other ones are going to require a little bit more structure in order to lead you to where you really want to be, and so to not be ambiguous. So I think that it is on a policy by policy basis. So clarity has to be one of the top priorities in policy creation, so that somebody coming in who hadn't been in the room can read that policy and know what the intent of that policy was. You know, so we need to have a kind of a litmus test, as it were, for that policy creation process. And that's one of the reasons that I really encourage us to look at something that allows us to be creating policy and working in these workshops on a continual basis, because we need to flex those skills. We know flex those muscles, those policy creation muscles, and that consensus building, and the building the relationships within the party that allows us to have the trust to be able to work together in this manner.
Yeah, and I would also say, Maria, I would be very concerned if I thought anyone was trying to reduce our policies to like 10 points of pablum. We have so many policies. Okay, so there's, just to cover off quickly, the kinds of places you look for Green Party policy. We have a green book in the members section of the website that is all the policies that the party has adopted, with the members adopting policy going back decades. Every now and then, right now, Paul Manley is leading an effort to remove the ones that are so outdated they no longer make sense, but nothing else should be removed. And anything that's removed is archived. We're not getting a lot of member work goes into all of these policies, and we have policies. I defy anyone to think of an area where we don't have policies. We have the square footage on chicken cages, and we have the number of animals who should be on a truck, and we have policies on specific countries. We have policy on Haiti, policy on the Mideast, policy on, you know, up the yin yang. It's good. It's good. We love policy. Okay, so that's one thing. It's called the Green Book. It's all the policies, encyclopedic. Then we have Vision Green, which was something we started when I became leader, so that there was a place to pick up something readable, because we're wading through unconnected policies that were passed at different conventions in the Green Book. Yes, you'll find out where we stand on things, but it's not particularly good reading. So Vision Green was the effort to take the policies and convert them to narrative in a way that could let people know what we stand for. And that's really long now. It just keeps getting longer. And the third place to look for our policies is in an election. And the platform does not replace the policies, but it says and this is a communications product, we think in this election, of all the encyclopedic policies that the Green Party of Canada members have passed, these are the ones that we think they're going to be most interested in this election. And we've been the brave ones for years. Like, we were the first party to call for same-sex marriage. We were the first party to endorse legalizing cannabis. We were the first party to talk about pharmacare. I mean, given that the NDP claimed that Tommy Douglas talked about it, he may have, but we brought it back on the agenda in the 2015 election. There's a lot of guaranteed livable income. We're the first party to talk about guaranteed livable income. So those places where we advance policy, eventually other parties come along and take our policies and implement them, which is fine with me as long as they don't mess them up when they do them. Anyway,
Yeah,
Judy, we should.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I know, but the 99% of the policy book was before the new motion development process was adopted, and that's what some people are saying, that the new policy, this new motion development process has too many rules and makes things too general, and then you cannot put forward a course of action. And I think that's an over-interpretation of, and perhaps was not what the people intended, but this over-interpretation is creating division, and it's actually being, I think, used sometimes to create divisions. That was my point.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that was happening to create divisions. I can tell you that there's no way that I think that any committee or group of Greens ever has the authority or the power to change anything passed by members at a BGM. They can't take it and dumb it down to a handful of lines. It's going to always be policy. It's a question of, can we communicate something in a way that's a little less mind-boggling for the average person than the enormous depth and detail of policy on almost everything. I mean, there's bound to be something we haven't got policy on yet, but what we want to do, and the continual motion development process, is to keep members engaged. But the policy process that Paul Manley's doing right now isn't to change policy or replace policy, but find some high-level descriptors, and all the policy depth will stay as our policy. You can't jettison work done by the members at a BGM. That's my view anyway. Sorry, Judy, but you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You know, we struggle between being, and you do this in academia too. You need to know your stuff to the nth degree. You need to be able to talk about it in an academic setting, but we in politics also have to be able to talk about it to the person on the street. So we have to have some guidelines. So rather than having candidates in all 338 ridings try to figure that out on their own, it's much better to have the party say, this is the messaging around this policy, so that we can communicate it, but the inner workings of that policy and how that policy is written is in stone, because it's been voted on by the members. And if somebody needs to change it, well, then it has to go through an amendment process, a policy amendment process, and be voted on by the members. Does that answer your question, Maria?
It does, but I think I remember clearly a statement in the process that was adopted to process these motions, the policy motions, that states that policies should be a principle statement rather than a defined course of action. And I think that distinction is what is causing this overinterpretation of what the party is trying to do with keeping policies at a higher level than and not tying things up in knots by making them too detailed. You know what I mean? It's that there is a specific instruction on the motion development process given to members that speaks to that.
Well,
and that I have been in forums, meeting, conversations, and heard people saying that the party is trying to kind of restrict the role of the grassroots in building policy, which I don't think was ever the intent, but it depending on how you read it, it could be interpreted that way.
Well, I think again, it comes back to how on a specific policy, how detailed does it need to be? Does it need to be to the degree that you're going to have to rewrite it every year because things change? Well, then that's not a good policy. That policy needs to be at a high enough level that you're not having to rewrite it because, you know, life goes on and things change, but not at so high a level that it has no teeth. You know, you have to be able to look at it and go, oh yeah, this is what we want done, you know, but not how we're going to do it. And I think that that's a bit of the difference. And I know in the policy motion that I'm working on a group with, that we have the policy, which is fairly high level, but we also have all the backgrounders, all the background documents that speak to and are evidence-based for why we're making those recommendations with the policy. So it's not just a policy, there's a whole package that goes along with the policy. Now, this is something that I'm not sure about, Elizabeth, maybe you can clarify. Those backgrounders, do they get archived with the policy as well, or is that only for the policy development process and voting during the BGM? Oh, you're muted, dear.
Elizabeth, you are mute.
Oh, there we go. I don't know why that was harder to unmute than usual. No, absolutely. Everything that is policy for the party cannot be undone. The only policy that would be removed would be, I mean, like for instance, we have achieved a big win, I think, and Paul Manley thinks as the shadow cabinet member on international trade, that the new version of NAFTA has eliminated Chapter 11 of NAFTA. So we can kind of archive. I mean, we had to rewrite Vision Green already. We can kind of archive that, yeah, we fought the battle to get rid of investor state agreement within NAFTA. Now we have to keep fighting to get rid of it in CETA and get rid of it, yeah. But so unless something has become an anachronism, it should not be removed as policy. And if it's an historic win, like legalizing cannabis, we save that and say, look, we took this position, now we've won. We took this position on Chapter 11 of NAFTA, now we've won. So as far as I understand it, and I'm not intimately involved, but Paul Manley took the lead on this at the last council meeting, that he would get this in a shape that when we get to our policy convention, there'll be something members can review and sign off on it as a decent revision without removing policy, summarizing it in ways that reduce the volume of reading people have to do. I mean, basically, there's finding the proper line in communication. It sure can't be reduced to pablum, because what would be the point? I mean, we can say, we could reduce, well, we have 6 core green values. They define everything we do, but we have policy beyond that bring those core green values into operational life, so that people who vote green know, okay, those Greens want climate action, but we know that involves a massive investment in a national electricity grid and 100% renewable electricity, decarbonizing electricity, you know, moving to home energy retrofits and building retrofits, and you know, and so there's a lot of specifics. If all we said was Greens believe in beautiful things and rainbows. I mean,
unicorns. Don't forget the unicorns.
Well, you know, that's one of those great losses in our campaigns to protect endangered species, that we lost the unicorns.
We did.
But I'm kidding. Don't let anyone think we get attacked by Rachel Notley enough as it is in this part of the world that we're flying around on our unicorns, she said, and that's why we could say we want to shut down the oil sands. Anyway, this is I'm gonna say, Maria, I'm super grateful you raised this, because not just in terms of Judy's campaign for leadership, but and I really feel guilty that I'm talking too much, but it's really informative to hear that. I did not know members were worried that might happen, so I'll be extra on my guard.
Yeah, and you may want to have a look at that motion development process, because I saw the example that was given to guide members to what would constitute a good policy statement or not. And I mean, the example lends itself to confusion, and I may get back to you, and that's precisely why later.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Maria, I'm going to put my personal email, which almost everyone on this call has already, in the chat box. So please just write me afterwards so we don't take too much more time. Thanks, Judy.
Okay, awesome. Fiona and David, I'm going to ask that you hold your questions for now. Your hands are up. I'm going to answer Charles' question because once we get the auction going, I'm going to lose it in the chat box. And Charles had asked if I'd be willing to fight hard to get Trudeau to agree to converting CERB to our guaranteed livable income, about 10 to 15% above the regional based poverty line prior to getting taxed or financially punished for having a job. I am a huge advocate of guaranteed livable income. I have, well, I actually have more to say about it than we can fit in here, but basically it needs to come as a payment from the federal government, not distributed through the provinces, but we have to work with the provinces to know what the regional poverty lines are. It could be down as close to even by postal code, so that we make sure that people are getting what they need to survive and a little bit more. We also have to make sure that it gives them, before we start taxing back, that it's enough. So that poverty line should be the baseline, but it should also direct when that money starts being taxed back at the end of the year, because we want it to be an incentive to go out and try something new, to start a small business, to see if you can work 2 or 3 days a week. If you're disabled, you know, a full five days a week is not as often not possible. But on our current social assistance, if you work 2 or 3 days, you lose your social assistance. So we need to have it so that it is flexible to allow for those life-changing moments in people's lives, like having a child or caring for an elderly or sick family member. So it needs to be flexible. You know, COVID has really illustrated what doesn't work with our very leaky social safety net, and that guaranteed livable income would be a foundation. You know, we say that we want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Well, you can't do that if you don't have boots. So guaranteed livable income gives you those boots. And that's what I will fight hard for. If I have some small input into eliminating poverty by bringing in guaranteed livable income, that would be, aside from my children, my son and my grandchildren, that would be the greatest legacy I could leave on this planet. Okay. Excellent. Oh, and one other thing that Charles had mentioned about, it's really important that we look at not just replacing services with money, because you know, social services also has things like a $5 copay for prescriptions. There's counseling and coaching and other supports. And if you're disabled, there's a number of other things, including occupational therapy and that sort of thing that you have access to. So those still need to be in place. You can't replace those with a check, but we need to be looking at bringing those incomes up so that people aren't struggling. Like, how can someone live on $800 a month when their rent costs them $600? It's not, you know, human beings, Canadian citizens, are our most important natural resource, and we have to take care of them and get them healthy and happy and educated, and they will take care of Canada. Excellent. Okay, so Elizabeth, we're going to hand it over to you. I want to just remind people that use the chat for reaching out and pledging. When we get to the points where you're feeling comfortable to be able to pledge, that would be fabulous. Crystal will follow up to get contact information from you in a private chat so that we can make sure that we follow up with you and help you through the process. And for people who are doing nominations, I just wanted to reiterate something someone reminded me of early on, is that it's a two-part. So when you do a nomination, if you just go to my website, click on nominate, and there you can choose the person you want to nominate. They will send you an email. You have to reply to that email saying yes for that nomination to happen. So that's awesome. Krista has just put the nomination Earl in the chat as well right now. Excellent.
And I just want to make sure, I think a lot of us are familiar with Zoom by now. I mean, I do my committee meetings on Zoom. I get to cross-examine the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff on Zoom. We're all getting, it's a weird world of Zoom. But just to make sure people know that if you just take your mouse and hover it over the chat box and hit click, I think a lot of you know how to communicate in the chat box. But if you go to the two and then it says to everyone, you can choose to go through the list of people who are on this call, and you can send a private message. So that's where Judy's saying you can send to Krista information that I will go on the website. I will donate $200. I just don't want to say it out loud in front of everyone. And then we can say anonymous, we just got a $200, so people can feel encouraged of how it's going, except for Dave Abbey, who's against the idea altogether. I'm just teasing you, Dave, because I love you. So sorry about that. Okay, so Krista has now put the tax credit information in. We're just a few people here. And what I want to do is start at a reasonable level. It's high, but I'm gonna go down the line, and it's going to go really, really quickly because I don't like asking for money, although people think I do. I like making sure Judy has enough money to get her name on the ballot for sure. Want to do that. So I'm not going to start at 1,625 unless someone stops me right now and says, puts it, oh, by the way, you know how to do the reaction thing too? You hover over the little fun reaction sign and you do like that. Fun. Okay, so just so you know, unless I see someone doing a thumbs up right this minute, I'm not going to ask for who has 1625. Just checking. Anyone have 1625? Okay, we're not going to bother asking there. I think I'd like to start at $900. I think that's a good level of a reach. It's a big reach. But if anyone wants to donate $900 on the Green Party website to Judy Green's leadership campaign, it will, if you pay taxes, we've covered that already, it will cost you $375 after the rebate. So if you pay taxes. So does anyone want to, Fiona has to leave. Oh, you pledged already. Thank you, Fiona. Anyone want to donate $900, going once, going twice, 900? You can wave at me in real life, or you can put a hands up in the participant box. Just looking, anyone at 900? Dave Woodbury. Is that you saying 900 or ask? Oh, no. That's you asking. Put your hand down, Dave. You just almost cost yourself $900. Oh my God. It's like an auction when someone scratches their nose. Are you scratching your nose, or are you offering that you're going to bid? Okay, so I'm not going to look at that chat box. I'm just checking. In real life, anyone waving at me that they would like to donate $700 to Judy's campaign, which will cost $250 after taxes. Anyone at 700? 600 will cost you $200 after taxes if you pay taxes. Anyone at $600? $500 will cost you $150 after taxes. Just checking. Anyone at $500? And $400. This is the best spot because a $400 donation, you get 75% back. If you're a tax-paying Canadian, it'll cost you $100 to give Judy's campaign $400, and you can do it privately. You can do it through contacting Krista. You can go online later, but a $400 donation will cost you $100 after taxes to support Judy Green for leader. $300 will only cost, oh, Carolyn Herbert, God love you. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you, Carol. Yay.
Okay, Carolyn.
Thanks, Carol.
Carolyn.
Carolyn, yes, thank you,
Carolyn. Yes, she's awesome, Carolyn. Thank you. And Fiona and Melanie, is that $400? That little hand up that you did? I think it is. Thank you very much. I think we yay for Melanie.
Yay, Melanie. Thank you.
Thank you. So that makes us an $800 plus whatever Fiona bid. Silverado, is that $400 from you? No. That's a hands up. That's a cheering. Oh. Okay. And James, God bless you, and Casey, stay in touch. I don't even know. I don't even know if you're an atheist, and I'm asking God to bless you. But anyway, forgive me if you're an atheist. Love you guys. Good to see you. Okay. Anyone else at $400? I'm going to drop to $300. Cost $75. Anyone at $300? Anyone at $200? Will also get you 75% back.
Oh, sorry, I just want to interject. Can you bring it up to 250?
250, absolutely. Anyone at 250? Oh, Susan, thank you. Yahoo! So we're
Oh,
over
thank you.
$1,000 so far in our little Zoom. It's fantastic. Thank you, Susan. Anyone else at 250? I went too fast. Anyone else at 250? Okay. Anybody at 200? At 100 will only cost you $25 if you're a taxpayer. And if you're not a taxpayer, it still only costs you $100. Oh, anybody at $100 to support Judy's campaign? Okay, dropping to $50 will cost you after taxes $12.50. Anybody at that? Okay, well, I think we've done well, Judy, that we've brought in at least, I bet, well, we don't know what Fiona's pledge was, but we're in good shape here. You're in better shape than when we started this.
Absolutely.
And a lot of you, think it over, tell your friends. You've now met Judy. Some of you have met Judy on a couple of chats. And I'm sure we all want to make sure she gets her name on that ballot.
Excellent.
So now we're at the last half hour mark, Judy, and you said there was a third component we were going to go to, and that was, I think, opening up more lines for questions. Was that right?
That's right. I just want to throw a challenge out there to everybody right now, and this is to help build your own EDAs, is that I would like you to contact at least 4 people who you think might join the Green Party. It's $10 for the year. If they join through the donate link on my website, that also comes to my campaign. And any renewals done through that donate link also comes to my campaign. So making sure that you have your membership up to date and your friends and volunteers in your EDAs, make sure that they're all up to date as well, and help me out would be wonderful. And I would really like to see us growing our green family in every single EDA across Canada.
One of the things that's pretty cool, Judy, I don't know if you saw the national numbers that were published out of Elections Canada, and the Conservatives and the Liberals were reported to be losing ground in donations due to COVID as compared to 2018. And we, because of the way they structured, as much as I kind of gripe about it as how much challenge they've put into fundraising for all of you leadership candidates, as a result of that approach, the Greens are not sliding back versus where we were in 2018, even with COVID. So the fundraising being done by leadership candidates has been keeping the party afloat, which really does matter because we need to be here. We need to be ready for an election. I think the WE scandal means that we could be in an election sooner than I thought we might be. Right, so the Bloc Québécois right now, I don't think we have any Quebecers on this call, but the Bloc is doing really well in their polling. And initially, I didn't think the Bloc would ever bring down the Liberals because they were so happy to have 32 seats. I mean, they got almost the same number of votes. They got more votes than us, right? We got almost as many as they did. They got 32 people elected, and we got 3, right? 1,200,000 and some votes for the Bloc, and 1,100,000 votes for us makes the difference between 3 seats and 32 seats when you're in first past the post. So I didn't think the Bloc Québécois would ever want an election because they thought they died and went to heaven as soon as that election was over. But right now, they think, what I hear from friends in Quebec is that the right-wing ridings that circle Quebec City, that often go Conservatives, they think they can win those for the Bloc. So the NDP may think it could do better right now. The only party that wouldn't want to go to the opposition party would be the Conservatives because they don't have their leader yet, and they're not doing all that well, and they're losing in fundraising. But it'll be really interesting. So we have back to the reason that it really is helpful to give money to the Green Party of Canada is we have to be ready. The 3 of us, Janica, Paul, and I, are running again. We want to make sure we get our next leader elected, wherever that person runs and whoever that person is. And we want to get all the other candidates. And I really appreciate people asking every one of the leadership candidates, oh, look at that, Krista, pledge update. We raised $1,250 tonight. Yay.
Thank you.
But what we really do need to think about, the party needs support. We need to be ready for the next election campaign. We don't know when it will happen, but it could happen it could happen soon. So we need to make sure that the party structure and the staffing and that we're ready to roll, which I hate the thought of it. An election in a pandemic, no thank you. But we as Greens, we're not in control. We just have to be ready.
Exactly.
So
thank you for that, Elizabeth. Mhm.
that's a great update. Thank you so much, everybody. Now, Judy, you want to introduce the next segment of the evening?
Sure. So we're just going to take some open questions. We have David, I think, was first, and then Silverado. So David, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Actually, I raised my hand because Fiona was trying desperately to interject in the conversation before last.
Ah.
And I guess she didn't know how to raise her hand, or she said she had raised her hand, but nobody was calling on her, and she wasn't, how shall I put it, aggressive enough to actually unmute herself and interrupt anyone. And I think that she should have, I mean, somebody should have been watching the chat box and should have called on her. She was obviously frustrated at not being able to contribute.
Well, I'm sorry that was the case. When we had the last clump of questions before we were moving to this segment with the auction, I had to cut it off. I said that there was just those two who had their hands raised. She had, and you and Silverado raised your hands after that. We had the one question that was in the chat box because we were going to lose it with all of the information going forward. And I'm sorry that Fiona had to leave before she was able to ask her question. So I will follow up with her to find out what that question was.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes you have to set the line, and sometimes people are on the wrong side of it. Follow up. Awesome. Okay, so did you have another question of your own, David, or shall we put your hand down?
No, I'll put my hand down. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Silverado, you're up next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I was wondering regarding fundraising efforts. I'm trying to think about how I can help. And I'd like to also align the Okanagan Greens at the same time from Vernon to Summerland. And is it possible to do something where like 50% could go to the local EDA and 50% to the candidate that we're trying to raise funds for? I'm just curious. Like,
there's no way for us to do that, but people could split their pledge between the two on two different links on the website. So we could set it up so we would provide the link for the candidate as well as the link for their EDA or how to find their EDA donation on the website.
Because I was thinking of doing like a 2020 thing where 20 went to the EDA and 20 to you, and it'd be like 20, you know what I mean? It'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was curious about, like, I believe the NDP they join the provincial and federal at the same time. Is there chances or thoughts behind that with your opinion?
Well, I just right now just add a little bit of context. Is for structure purposes, unlike the federal New Democrats, the Greens at the provincial level and the Greens at the federal level are just as separate and also just as united around values as the Canadian Greens, the New Zealand Greens, New Brunswick Greens. We're separate legally, and our structures and governance is completely separate. So joining one party and automatically joining another, the reason that the NDP, for instance, control it so much is that that way an NDP federal member isn't allowed to join a different party provincially, right? Whereas in the the Green Party of Canada, you could be a member of the Green Party of British Columbia and you could join the federal Liberal Party. So we don't have a top-down structure around how people want to express their preferences. Obviously, we would much rather that everybody who's a member of the Green Party of Canada is a member of the Green Party of Nova Scotia, Green Party of Prince Edward Island. I mean, why wouldn't you be? but we don't, our structure is of separate legal entities. Now, I'll turn it to Judy for thoughts on what we might, what her view of that is, but that's the current state of play.
Yeah, absolutely. I've spoken to Naomi Hunter, and they struggle with that in Saskatchewan a great deal. And there might be a way that we could suggest on a provincial page saying, well, if you are joining the Green Party of Canada, oh, we see that you're in this province. Are you interested in learning something about the Green Party of Saskatchewan? You know, there might be something like that, but we couldn't do anything or take money or do memberships one for the other. It would have to be just an information to kind of clarify that they are two separate and that you can have membership in both. But I think we have to be really careful to make sure that we're not stepping or crossing any legal lines there.
We know, Silverado, we are in a BC Green Party leadership race while we're in a federal candidate. I don't think there's anybody left online who's from British Columbia right at the moment, but because Megan's, oh, Susan, where are you? Where are you? I didn't ask.
I'm also from North Island, Powell River.
Okay, because we lost Megan. But yeah, well, of course, we've got 3 candidates for Green Party leadership in British Columbia right now. And I'm neutral on the federal race, but I'm definitely endorsing Sonia First now in the BC race. But the Kim Darwin is also great, and Kim Brewer just entered the race. Oh, there's a 4th person, and I'm forgetting his name in the journal. Anyway, there's the Green Party of British Columbia. So, of course, we're trying to say to people, when I say to federal Greens in BC, be sure you've joined to vote in the leadership race for federal Greens. I also add, and by the way, make sure you've joined so you can vote for the leader of the Green Party of British Columbia. So 2 leadership races in places where we've elected, you know, getting Greens elected. Once you break through the barrier, then everybody can see, okay, they're electable. So thank heavens. I mean, I think it won't be long before we're electing Greens in Nova Scotia. We have a number of municipal councillors who've been elected in Nova Scotia who were federal Green candidates first. And we'll see Greens elected everywhere. But I think, Silverado, we're likely to see the structure stay provincial and federal separate.
Yeah, they will be. And Silverado had asked earlier a little bit about my connection to BC, and others on the call might be interested as well. I was actually born in Princeton, BC. My grandmother was the missionary school teacher for the United Church in Kwapieski Cove on Quadra Island, the Cape Mudge Reserve there. And she raised my grandmother there. My mother was born there and she was raised there as well. And so we have close ties, and I hadn't realized how much of the Indigenous teachings had kind of filtered into our family life. And so it was really quite interesting to start exploring some of that, that connection. But I did my high school in Summerland, BC, and lived all the way in the small towns from Peachland right up to West Bank. So I have close connections to the Okanagan. I still have a lot of family members there. All of my father's side of the family is still in the Okanagan. And thank you for organizing something, Silverado. Did you have another question?
If I could. Yep.
Sure. Okay. Oh, you're muted there, Silverado.
I thought I read something about it's only $1 for the young Greens.
Yes, for young Greens, yeah. But you have to have them contact one of the young Green counselors or Prakeet directly, and then they have to do it separately. Just because our website isn't set up to handle just a $1 donation, but that is what's going on right now. And Greens at 14 years old can be party members and they can vote for the leader.
Great, because I think that was, I know, a handicap for me at times. Sorry I didn't donate to your campaign, but financially is one, having a MasterCard, and sometimes for a lot of people $10 is a big deal.
It
so
is.
It'd be nice to be able to help out with that for those people that should have a say. And
I know. I've spent a lot of my life as well in below the poverty line and relying on unemployment insurance in the winter for all of my 20s when I was working with my parents were they took they did a romantic impulsive decision to move from the area around Hartford, Connecticut to Margaree Harbor, Cape Breton Island, and open a restaurant and go very broke very fast. And I totally get it that $10 is a lot. I mean, and when I ran Sierra Club of Canada, my income as a single mother was $24,000 a year. Now I know that was in the 1990s, but it didn't go very far in the 1990s either. So I totally know, and it's still a lived experience for me that the end of the month is a stressful time. And I don't feel good about, I mean, I feel great about my MP salary. I think it's a hoot that I now pay more money in taxes than I used to earn by a long shot. And feel very, very privileged and honored. And I can't get over people when I see them in the newspaper saying, you know, we'd get higher quality politicians if we only paid them more because we can't compete with the private sector. And I always want to say, you'll get better people when you pay less. Because anyone who's influenced by the money should not be in politics.
I agree.
Yeah, we have one candidate running for leadership who is actually a millionaire, but I won't out who that is. It's not Judy.
No, and it's not me. No, not me at all, I'm afraid. So Susan, I think you have your hand up there.
Yes. I'm aware of how important it is for us to have difficult conversations, and that more and more that seems to be a really important quality. And I was just wondering, Judy, what your experience has been in that regard. I mean, you're a very good speaker and clear and so on, but I'm talking about that thing of having to really address a truthful issue that might be hard for another person to hear.
Well, I've been working as a wellness coach for the last 6 years. And so I coach people through lifestyle changes, and they get to hear the truth from me. And that, you know, they don't get to hide behind all of the crutches that they've put in their lives to avoid making those big decisions and taking the responsibility. I'm a big believer in personal responsibility. And I have to kind of chuckle because I get interviews and people go, okay, well, this is a touchy question and you may not want to answer it. And I just grin because I will always answer every question. And with the understanding that I will answer with the knowledge and experience I have to this moment in time. And I may go off and learn something new tomorrow that will change that position. But I will always share what my position on a situation is, or what my opinion is. It's actually kind of funny because in my family, it's like, ask Judy, she has an opinion on everything. And so it's become a family, kind of a family joke, which actually works well in politics. Who knew? All of these weird and wonderful tools that you have in your tool belt that you never thought would be applicable to politics. But I don't shy away from anything. I've also been a house parent for unwed mothers in Halifax. And most of the girls in our facility had come up through a social services system or lived on the streets. And we actually had girls there who were rescued from sex trafficking rings. Halifax is a real hub for that. And trust me, you get over any uncomfortableness about any topic, because the girls will test you on any topic that they think is going to get under your skin. So I've been well vaccinated for these types of questions. And really, I always just keep focused in my mind what what the goal is here. You know, what is the target that we're working towards, and how can we get there? And sometimes you have to go through some pretty thorny territory to get there. I work a lot with people with PTSD, and it can get really hairy for them, and I have to be there for them, which means that I can't let my own emotions get involved. I have to have that professional distance and focus, and really be laser sharp for them. And those are some of the skills that I just do inherently now. I've been practicing for so many years that I believe will help in those circumstances. And also, I'm rather soft-spoken, so people underestimate me. But trust me, when I put my foot down, it is down. Ask my husband, ask my son. No means no in this house. And it will take one too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Awesome.
Are there other questions that you're seeing, Judy? Because I see one over here in the chat box about the we controversy from Cheryl.
Yes, that's a very topical.
Cheryl, do you want to open up your mic and ask us why it concerns you, or do you want us to just read it off the chat box? I think I'll take that as reading it off the chat box. Do you want to answer this, Judy, or do you want me to share? It's an interesting question because it's consuming our media.
It is.
What do you think?
Totally it is. You know, that's one thing that I've discovered with the.
Is it a witch hunt or a scandal? Cheryl asks.
Exactly. With partisan politics, that's a question you always have to look at, because there's always dirt being dug up and flung based on the gotcha moments. Now, as we're starting to look closer, you know, honestly, I think Justin Trudeau is completely oblivious to his own privilege and doesn't even see when he's doing these very unethical things. I think that is just, you know, his way of living. It seems normal to him, where it is very unethical decisions that he's making. I mean, there's 3 now that I've counted in the last little while. And but with we itself, it's interesting because as things are starting to be dug up, there's some real questions about the nonprofit side and the profit side of the organization. Like, there's a lot of questions about the organization itself, even independent of Justin Trudeau's involvement in it. So I think that there does need to be some investigation into that. But yeah, I think we have to be careful not to be a witch hunt, but we do have to take a close look at the things that make you go, you know, you want to look a little bit deeper and see what's really going on there. And
yeah, I'd say your caucus of Green MPs from the get-go, from the beginning of this pandemic, when we raised issues for young people, we weren't asking for young people to have volunteer opportunities. We were looking for young people to get paid. So the first thing is the structure of that program. I actually, in watching Justin Trudeau's, I mean, I sit on the finance committee, although I'm not a member, I managed to get there in their face. And Wayne Easter from PEI, if any PEIers are still here on the line with us, eventually he feels sorry for me and he lets me ask a question. So like I'll go through 4.5 hours of a committee hearing to get 2 minutes worth of questions. But it's worth it, because sometimes my questions reveal more than the questions other people are asking, because I'm not looking for the partisan gotcha moment. I'm trying to think it through. And so I hope I won't sound too charitable, but I actually think Justin Trudeau was telling the truth, that his idea for this program was to get his Canada Service Corps, which is a government thing that he set up as Prime Minister, with the idea of it being sort of like the US Peace Corps, or like his dad set up Katimavik. That's what he was thinking of. He wasn't thinking this was going to be delivered by an arm's length group or a charity. That said, the whole concept was for kids of privilege who didn't need work. And you really do need work as a student in the summer months. That's when you need to make money to be able to go back to school. So the concept was off. On top of which, I completely agree with you, Judy, that they're completely unaware of their privilege. And the people around Trudeau, the people in cabinet, had no idea that Bill Morneau had so much of a problem ethically with the We Charity. So while Trudeau's wife, Sophie, had gone through the ethics commissioner to make sure that what she was doing was kosher, Obviously, they hadn't thought through, what about Margaret Trudeau? What about Sasha Trudeau? But they hadn't realized that Bill Morneau and his wife, of course, is a McCain, right? One of the McCains. So neither Bill Morneau nor his wife, Nancy McCain, actually have any idea that the vast wealth is creating, as you say, Judy, they're so used to it. The fact that Bill Morneau could say so casually to us on the finance meeting, oh, I realized yesterday I asked them to double check, and it turns out that trip we took to Ecuador, we hadn't paid all our expenses. There was $41,000 outstanding. So I wrote the check this morning. And I was like, everyone's like, you just wrote that check. It's like Nigel Wright. Remember when Nigel Wright wrote the check for $70,000 for hush money for Mike Duffy? And he thought it was, I mean, there's a class of billionaires in this country who think it's normal that you just write a personal check for $70,000 and pass it off to someone. And just like any of us would do in similar circumstances, like Bill Morneau forgot about the chateau in France when he declared his assets. It's just, I can't, who among us hasn't forgotten the chateau in France? I've forgotten it so much I don't even remember I have it. So I mean, it gets to a point of crazy makingness. So I will say to your question, which is a great question, Cheryl, I think this country's media loves stupid scandals over real coverage. We're ignoring the climate emergency. Yes, there are. It is an ethical scandal for sure. Yes, it is a mess for sure. But where is the attention on what happened to the report on missing murdered Indigenous women and girls? It's been more than a year. We haven't gotten any answers. There's big issues that we should be able to keep some level of an attention span beyond the sort of the nanosecond of what media looks at, unless it's a scandal. And then they dig in day after day after day. So I would say it's somewhere between witch hunt and scandal. It's definitely a scandal. The partisan people love it. And the liberals are dropping in the polls, so the conservatives are rubbing their hands with glee. But the climate emergency, I just keep saying, it's like a light flashing on that the warning is today Canada lost the largest ice shelf we have off Ellesmere Island. An ice shelf larger than Manhattan of Canadian territory fell into the sea within the last 24 hours. And all that the media want to talk about is Craig and Mark Kielburger, who I think are a scandal. I think their organization, their charity needs a real lens on it. I mean, how do you begin to understand people running a charity where they become rich while running a charity? That's a question mark for people. But yeah. And Carolyn saying, how hard is it to get the media to acknowledge us? They acknowledge me more when I score a good question on the We charity than when we put out a press release, which we did yesterday, to say we have to pull the plug on Site C. Pull the plug. Site C is a disaster. We should not be allowing it to happen. None of you would know unless you read the Green Party website that we put out a press release from the Green Party of Canada that it's time to pull the plug on Site C.
And from and I think this is a common from the leadership contestants I've had this conversation with. We all run into the same problem. Media releases, nobody even looks at them anymore. We get no traction there. We've done op-eds into every media outlet that we have access to and have gained little to no traction unless it is a scandal. And even when I'm interviewed in relation to some of the big things that have hit the media, and I'm the voice of reason, this is why this happened, and this is how we should look at it, and this is the bigger picture, they choose to go with the sound bites and the clickbait. So it's very frustrating, and this is one of the things that I think we need to get better at as Greens, is we have to become our own media. How that works, we need to put our brains together and think about how we can use alternative media, how we can use social media, and how we can get our message out and do an end run around the mainstream media that is only interested in the clickbait.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I've during the last campaign, whenever the LEAP manifesto came out, I think it was the 2015 campaign, and we immediately put out a press release supporting the LEAP manifesto. Of course, no one knows we did. even the people who, even, you know, Avi Lewis didn't know the Green Party. I had to send him our press release. He didn't know we'd endorse the LEAP manifesto. So I maintain that if you really want to keep a secret in this country, your best bet is to put it out as a Green Party press release, because nobody will ever know, right? It's just, so yeah, we have to get better at this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, we've got what, 22, I'm not sure where we're at total members now. I think we're creeping up there, 23, maybe 24,000. You know, if we can find a way to really leverage our membership to get the messages out in social media, and that means connecting with the membership, that means instructing the membership and giving them clear instructions, and the message, the videos, the posts that we want to have shared, and tell them how to do it. It's a good start.
Judy, before we run out of time, Avra has written a great question to us, and it's this one, and I want you to answer this, Judy. I'm going to shut up. I wonder, I know I make this promise sometimes, but I can't keep it. Anyway, I wonder what 3 planks of the federal platform are priorities, and what do you think is going to magnetize Canadians to consider green as a viable option?
I think we have to look at our messaging in terms of, we know climate emergency is the most important thing. But if we look at the tools that we're using to address the climate emergency, they are also the tools that are going to make the biggest positive change in people's lives. During COVID-19, people don't have the bandwidth. I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but people are at the bottom level where they are looking for security, safety, you know, food on the table, and their rent being paid for this month. So we need to be addressing those through guaranteed livable income, through pharmacare, through our equity policies that are making sure that our Black, Indigenous, and people of color are cared for, take action on the reports that have already gone through. We do reports in this country out the wazoo, but we don't take any action on them. You know, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We have the Peace and Reconciliation. We have UNDRIP. You know, if we take action on those, if you look at those documents, the action that's taken there will have far-reaching effects all across Canada for all of us, as well as in the environment and on climate change. So we have to be sneaky about the way we are messaging our climate change policies in showing how they will have positive change in the average person's life, because that's the only way we're going to get traction with people who are in a contracted phase where they are just hanging on and trying to make it through the week. If we come in with lofty ideas of climate change that they don't understand, don't have the bandwidth with, we'll lose them. So we have to talk to them in the language that is important to them, and that where their minds are at right now. In coaching, we call this meeting them where they're at, you know, and then you have to work with them to move to where we all need to be. So it's more of a process than picking 3.
So in terms of the communication in the next election, do you see us as focusing around what we learned during COVID? And we tried to do that as a caucus in writing Reimagining Our Future, but is that going to be, and someone's, Carolyn's just posted around food being expensive and looking at tools for survival, link climate breakdown to food scarcity. There's a lot of ways to continue to talk about those security issues for people through the lens of what people have this extraordinarily weird period of time that I will tell you I'm really sick of it. But how would you as leader keep taking our message and giving and leading Canadians towards understanding that green policies will make life better?
Well, it's exactly that, Elizabeth. You have to look at what is food security. Well, what are our policies on food security? Our policies on food security are local, distributed, small animal ag. So we're not having the distribution, but issues which we're seeing really come under the microscope during COVID-19 We don't have the processing plants in like 3 main plants in Canada that have been impacted because of COVID-19 infections in those plants, and they were shut down for a period of time. So we're looking at local, and people are really looking at, supporting their local businesses right now as well. The whole focus has changed. So that really feeds into where people's minds are right now. And everybody needs food, we need clean water, jobs are huge right now. Well, our whole transition to clean energy is around more jobs in the new energy environment than in oil and gas. And so that ties beautifully. It's like we have COVID-19 comes along, and we've been practicing for it because we were practicing for climate change. The solutions to COVID-19 and recovering as a society and taking care of our people are the solutions that we've developed for climate change, because ultimately the crisis is so similar in terms of how it's affecting people's lives. And so it's about just looking at what is most important to people: jobs, security, and we have the solutions for that.
So that is a great note on which to end. We've been talking for 2 hours, and I do apologize to those of you that want to hear Judy, and I talked a bit too much, I think. I'm sorry, but I do hope you got a good sense of what a great candidate Judy is. I certainly benefited from learning from you as members, and the questions you raised are real important to hear. I hope anyone who wanted to communicate with me made note of my personal email address when it flashed by on the chat box. It'll sit there for a while. I'm going to leave in case people want to continue to chat with Judy without me being in the way. But love to you in Clemensport from Sydney by the Sea. We're both on our, yeah. I miss
it's right
my
behind
ocean.
me. You can't see right now. But
I know it's dark where you are. I know. I can see I can see the misty Salish Sea in front of me.
Nice.
Anyway, love you, dear. I'm going to scoot. Take care.
Great. Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And I will stay on for a little bit. There is a question here from Charles about Canadian grown gets as much food grown near us, but at a decent price. Why would an identical fresh produce grown internationally cost less than grown locally? And the reason for that is if you look at what people are being paid, wages in these other countries. And oftentimes our cheap produce and cheap goods are on the expense or on the backs of low-paid workers with horrendous working conditions that we would never allow in Canada, or I'd like to think we would never allow in Canada. And so we've got this weird phenomenon in North America, is that something comes into our possession, we don't even look at where it came from, and then once we're done with it, we throw it away and don't look at where it goes. We have this little window of our attention span on things, and I think we need to broaden that. We are complicit in what happens to produce the goods that come into our homes, and we are complicit in what happens and how they are disposed of. And I have a little saying, as a businesswoman, I don't have a problem with someone making a comfortable living from a business. I don't have a problem with profit. I do have a huge profit or a huge problem if that profit comes on the backs of people or the planet. And that's my bottom line when we're talking about economic growth and business and worker relations. Yes, and there is, Carolyn was also saying that there's a link between climate breakdown and food scarcity. Absolutely, we're seeing it with COVID-19, and it's only going to get worse with the climate crisis. I have the benefit of having some really good friends here who run an organic farm, one of the only places in Canada that grows organic rice. We have a real micro environment here around Annapolis Royal that allows us to grow some really cool things. And what they're finding now, as well as the other farmers in the area that I talked to, is they're having to experiment with different seeds and varieties, because the varieties of foods that they were able to grow even 5 years ago are not growing here anymore. The climate is changing that quickly, and that's who you're going to get as allies. The people who are working on the land, or who are working in the oceans and see firsthand the effects of the climate crisis. That's just the reality of what is out there, and people who are looking will see that. And we need to be working to show them that we can be their political arm, voicing the concerns that they see every day. So my camera has decided it's going to slide and do some weird things here. Hang on there, there we go. It already decided it's fisheye. I got this new camera and it's fisheye, and I'm like, not what I bargained for, but we're working with it. Technology. Okay, just seeing if there's anything else here. Yes, and there are some apps like boycott.com. I also like the Non-GMO Project is a really good one for telling you what's going on with your food. Yeah, absolutely, use the tools that are out there to help. And Susan, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say I have to go, but thank you so much, Judy. I'm really glad to continue to be in touch with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for spending the evening with me here tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Goodbye.
Excellent. Bye-bye. Excellent. Is there any other questions? Charles, I see you waving. Let's get you unmuted.
Okay, instead of typing, in your view, to afford to implement a federal basic income, apparently there was stats released by this female doc, what's name, Forget from Manitoba. She went on to say to afford Ontario's model federally, we'd have to increase the GST by 3%.
Well, that depends on how you want to fund it. You know, we have to look at the full cost of the existing system and the savings that we'd be making in replacing parts of that system. Like, it's not a blanket statement. Like I said before, there still needs to be those services. But we also, I think, need to look at the full cost of what it costs us to have somebody homeless and on the street. What does it cost us to have somebody incarcerated rather than giving them a basic income that keeps them from being desperate and committing a petty crime? Hundreds of thousands versus 24,000. You know, we really need to be looking at what the cost of poverty is in our world. Something as simple as type 2 diabetes, which is epidemic proportions, simply because people do not have access or the knowledge to make healthy food from whole foods. If we can look at the causes of the real problems, the real expenses in our society, and look at how much we'd be saving, plus we're doing the right thing for our people. You know, we're supporting them. I have real problems when people are well, you know, I'm not going to sit back and pay somebody to sit on a couch all day. You know, everyone's heard that, right? And there may be one or two people who'll do that for a little while, but trust me, they will get bored. Look at how antsy people are. You know, with COVID-19, we're all like, give us something to do. That's not the reality. You know, there is a psychological thing that goes on when your generations are upon generations are on social assistance, and it may take a generation to help those people through that. Because it is a generational trauma. Poverty is a generational trauma. Jeez, this little camera, holy cow. Gee. And so we really need to look at where our savings are coming from. Yes, we may have to put some more money into the pot, but you know, let's start tracking down the people who are dodging taxes and evading taxes, and stop writing off their taxes. Like, Joe down the street ends up having to pay like way more in what it costs for them to reclaim what he made a mistake on in his tax return, and these people are going through hoops and paying professionals to hide money so that they don't have to pay taxes. I'm sorry, we all need to pay our fair share of taxes. And so that's a good place to start. In the last election, we had a number of other proposals for funding. A lot of the projects that we were talking about, some of them are the very small, minuscule, like I think it was 0.005% or 4% on those rapid electronic trading transactions, not for the average person's like interact, but when they're doing those rapid trades, when they're selling and buying stocks, that adds up quite quickly. Things like making sure that companies that are making billions of dollars by selling in Canada actually pay Canadian taxes. Just because you're selling on the internet, you shouldn't get, or you have incorporated in a certain country, that shouldn't give you the ability to avoid paying taxes in the countries that you are actually making money in. So it's, you know, we have rules that we need to enforce. We need to be smart about making sure we close some of these gaps in the new economies to make sure that everybody is paying their fair share. And it isn't about, you know, one person getting something and somebody not. It's about having that level, that foundation, making sure everybody's got the boots they need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
Yes. To go further along with that idea, what was I trying to get at? Train of thought. You make so many good points here. The disability tax credit portion of the federal government, right now it's very restricted. It's harder to qualify for federal aid and provincially with the ODSP system. Would you agree on easing it up and then using that part for disability related costs added to the GLI, Guaranteed Livable Income?
Absolutely, and that's a really good example of where we need the systems that are in place that provide additional supports like occupational therapy and other supports that somebody with disabilities might need to have help with, that isn't just a check. But the amounts that are currently being paid for living expenses with the ODSP, the disability here in Nova Scotia, you know, our social assistance rates, and they're named different things in each province because everyone is provincially managed. None of them are anywhere near a living wage. Here in Nova Scotia, a single person on disability gets 36% of what would be considered a living income as a market basket model, which is how poverty is determined here. 36% of what would be required to live. And we're expecting people to exist on this. Like this is the stresses, the health concerns that come out of just the stress of being in that constant state of not having enough is negatively impacting our communities and our economy. You know, we need to be taking care of our people.
Yeah, on a final note, what will be your assets limit? Right now it's 40,000 a year for Ontario's system of ODSP. A friend of mine can't qualify because he has around 70 grand, but he wants to save it for his daughter's future, kind of thing. Well, what kind of cap limit would you put for assets, like our RSPs and all?
Right.
Like, would it be 100 grand in total, or?
I think that's a discussion that I would have to look into more to see what that would need to be. And I suspect that it would be different in different provinces, different areas, because of regional, because of what there's a huge disparity in cost of living across Canada. Like downtown Toronto, $2,000 doesn't even pay you rent. You know,
that's right.
Here in West Nova, $2,000, you're okay. I mean, most things are covered. Yeah, so we really have to be looking regionally as well. But yeah, I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. And you know, that's really where it comes into why Guaranteed Livable Income is so much better than any of the current social safety nets, because all of the current social programs you have to qualify for. And it's very narrow, and you have to fit yourself in a box, and inevitably there's somebody who doesn't fit in a box for one thing or another, and they get left out. And what are they supposed to do? There isn't other options for them. And that needs, or that means testing is demoralizing, and the amount of money that is spent on enforcing that in having all of those tests done and followed up to make sure, heaven forbid, somebody isn't doing something they're supposed to do. We get rid of that, we save a lot of money that can then be going in to pay for the system. And if the money just comes in, no strings attached, if you make over a certain amount, then we start taxing it back. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. That's done.
Yeah. Would GLI yeah, would GLI get rid of EI?
Yes. Yeah. Guaranteed livable income. I could see it getting rid of EI because that would allow the fluctuations, especially for seasonal workers. It would get rid of EI. It would get rid of old age security. So it would take that aspect of it. CPP is something that we pay into. It's a pension plan. I don't see that being replaced at this point in time, but maybe sometime down the future, there could be some mechanism, but people who paid into it need to have their contributions returned. And we have to make sure that we are compensating for that. Like when CPP came into being, it was meant to supplement company pensions. And how many companies do you know that even give pensions anymore? I mean,
Tears,
there's not many, and unless the governments do, but not a lot of the big companies do. They'll do some RRSPs and such, but they don't do pensions. So we certainly can't just take it away. We have to have it replaced with at that amount or higher, and have a transition off of CPP into whatever new calculation is decided.
Yeah. Well, even like companies that went out of business, like Sears, their own employees didn't even get their
right.
CPP or whatever you want to call it.
That's
Sears
right.
to provide.
Yeah, the pensions totally gone. And I do think that there was, I can't remember exactly, I thought there was a bill introduced that would protect pensions from bankruptcies. So that was one of the first things before creditors. The pensions would be protected. And I would support that 100%, that those pensions need to be protected in case of a bankruptcy.
Well, you had me thinking a lot tonight, and thank you for your time on all of this matter.
Thank you, Charles. Excellent.
All right, take care.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'll just observe.
Okay. So Maria's saying she has to go as well. Excellent. It was, let's see on the back. Yes, and Maria had mentioned, or on the back of taxpayers through corporate welfare. I'm not a big fan of corporate welfare at all. The big subsidies that we hand out because we're promised this low-hanging fruit with a few jobs, and we're always promised more jobs with higher paying jobs when actually comes into reality. We need to start looking at what the reality is, how these companies have behaved in the past. And I love these old sayings because they stick in my mind. But fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, I think we're being fooled into the hundreds and thousands of times now because a lot of the big companies do the same thing over and over and over again. Especially oil and gas. Just last year, and I can't remember which company it was, but the provincial government of Alberta had paid out subsidies to an oil field company, and within a few months they actually packed up and left the country, taking that subsidy with them. Never created jobs, didn't clean up their oil wells, and just abandoned everything. So we really have to have tighter controls on corporations in terms of their responsibility to clean up their messes. Again, Mom always told me to leave a place better than I found it. Well, we need to expect that of corporations as well. Let's just keep it simple for some of these basic respectful things, behaviors that we expect from one another and we expect from companies and corporations as well. They're not necessarily the boogeymen, but we've taught them they can get away with a whole lot of stuff in Canada, and that has to end. Sure, Silverado, you have some questions?
Yeah, I was just basically asking what was
my motivation
to run, and what keeps you from getting PTSD, dealing with all the folk you do.
Good
and what would keep you when you...
Yeah. My husband, it has nothing to do with politics, doesn't want anything to do with politics, but he supports me 100%. He creates an oasis here. that is an oasis of safety for me. And I really treasure this space and this time, and where I can just retreat into it and not have to think about anything. It really does help. I do all the usual, you know, self-care stuff with meditation. I love walking on the beach. I have my dog, all that wonderful things. I have to be better about eating better. The COVID has got me eating more stress foods than I normally do. But my motivations for running really started with my evaluation of my campaign last year, being the first time I'd ever run. Everybody on my campaign, there was a couple who'd run on, or had not run, but had worked on other campaigns and other parties, but done just small office things, not in any kind of organizational capacity. So we were pretty much starting from scratch, as well as $36 in the bank account, and absolutely no volunteers, just the previous candidate who hadn't even answered any of his emails in 4 years. So it was very interesting, and we approached it in using the tools that I have, just as a marketing exercise to get us out there, and then to get out, do a listening campaign, and get out the vote. So that was kind of our 3 phases of deployment for the campaign, and fundraising the whole way, because we didn't even have money to get started with. And we took the vote from 4.1 to 12.67%, and did quite well. Came in 3rd. We beat the NDP in our riding by a little bit, but it counts. And we won the student vote. So that was a lot of good things, but we didn't win, but we learned a lot, and I wanted to learn more. So I reached out to other campaigns to see what their experiences had been, and I started seeing very similar experiences and very similar stories. And these really looked to me like symptoms of organizational structural challenges within the party. And then we started tracing those back. You know, I'm a software engineer and aircraft mechanics, so we did some troubleshooting, traced them back to the source, and really came up with a really peeled back the curtain as to what's going on within the party itself in a way that most people never have to. And sometimes I wish that curtain had just stayed closed. But worked with some other people to come up with a proposal for federal council to propose a transitional director to come in and fix some of the structural problems within the communication within the different parts of the party and within the staff as well. And we got a lot of people signing it, but we didn't get any traction with federal council. And then we had the federal council elections, and I was very hopeful for the people who got in, because they're all wanting to see more transparency and more communication, and they're working hard to do that. But it's hard to change the direction of a huge tanker in the ocean, which is what a big organization or even a small organization is. It's all headed in one direction, and there's people who want to take it in 2 different directions, whether top down or bottom up. So hierarchical, a few people at the top making decisions, or structure it so that the people in the party, in this grassroots party, have ways in which they can influence the direction that this party goes in, and that there is a funnel of ways that people can get involved. So roadmaps into, how do I get involved in creating more policy? How do I set up an EDA? How do we get out the vote? How do we manage our volunteers? How do we connect with other EDAs and learn from them? So I'd love to see a mentoring program between EDAs, or between Green Party members who've been involved in the party for a long time and have that institutional memory, who would like to mentor either young Greens in the party or EDAs. I'd love to see us do something where we're twinning EDAs across Canada with EDAs and Green parties all around the world, in the 80 countries that we have Greens elected in. I would love to see that, you know, really making this grassroots mesh really work, and not just be paying lip service to it. One of the things that came out of that is that I realized in all 6 debates and on every doorstep that I had stood on and said that we are a grassroots democracy, that the membership has say and how the party operates, and that it's membership driven, I was lying. And it pissed me off that that was the case. And I am in this race to make that change, because if we don't, we are going to be just, if there's an anchor that's holding us back, because people are wanting to do things one way and they've been doing it that way, and it's holding us back because it's shutting out the membership. You can see that in the communications where you only get.
Can you repeat that? Like you don't feel it's membership based, or I didn't quite catch that.
In theory, we are membership based. In actuality, the mechanisms for being able to do that aren't there. There's no communication. There's no way for members to find out how to write policy, or to get involved, or how to do the things within, in what ways can they be involved other than at the EDA level? How do EDAs grow? How do they learn from each other? You know, none of that is in place. There's the intent and people want that to happen, but the structure's not there. The party itself is not allowing that to happen. And part of that's because people would come in with wonderful ideas and they'd hit a brick wall because the previous executive director would say, we just don't have the capacity for that. And there's something that's called euphemistically the shredder that these ideas would go into when it went in, crossed that line between governance with our federal council and into the staff, and it it didn't get implemented. So that's some of the things that are really broken in the party that need to be fixed. And we had great hopes with a new executive director that would be the case. But we have some growing pains that are going on right now. But this is things that members need to be aware of that are happening, and that we all have to work together to have a vision of what we want our party to be and a mission. Like being a business person, it surprised me that we do not have a vision and a mission statement for the Green Party of Canada. We have our 6 principles, but we do not have a vision and a mission statement. And that tells me we haven't done the work to say what exactly our vision for this party is, and our mission is how we're going to get there. You know, I tell my grandkids that if you have a goal, but you don't have a plan, you don't have a goal, you have a wish. You know, so a goal without a plan is just a wish. And that's unfortunately, I think, where we're at right now, because we have been hobbled in actually taking the steps that we need to get there. How many EDAs come alive for an election and then go away and have to start from scratch again? You know, you see that over and over and over again. There's not that many who actually stay active between campaigns. And that's what we have to do in order to grow in our local communities, have the green presence there, build up our volunteer base, train our volunteer base so that we're all ready to hit the ground running. And the support needs to be there to do that. And it doesn't mean staff have to be doing all of that. We can have committees of or working groups of members who are highly trained, very skilled, who can be helping to shepherd that and be resources for EDAs across Canada in a volunteer capacity. Not everything has to be paid staff. And so we're starting to see a little bit of a shift towards that with the new federal council, that we're getting a little bit less iron grip on certain things, and including what Elizabeth had said about communications, so that the federal council regional reps can now directly send emails out to the people in their provinces. They've never been allowed to do that before. So these are some of the things that are starting to move in that right direction. Well, we don't have a lot of time, you know, to get into Parliament and to get in Parliament in the numbers that we have to in order to be effective. Climate change is tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock behind the twin crises that we're living through right now, which is COVID-19 and you know, an economic crisis. So we really have to be getting our house in order and moving forward in a collective way where we can be leveraging more the involvement of very highly skilled and trained volunteers to be able to really activate the membership and utilize the skills that we have at hand. We've got 22,000 members, 22 or 24. We're gaining up there all the time. And if we could even have a fraction of those working in volunteer capacity, we'd have more staff than any of the other federal parties. So that's why I'm here. This is why I'm still doing this.
I think that's neat. Interesting you talked about twinning, because I was thinking that would be an interesting thing to do, like coast to coast, BC and where you are, and
Yeah.
even in Winnipeg. So you're not with Quebec, Ontario, which I think tends to have a very strong voice, where you can hear these other places. And
Exactly. Yes. And,
be interesting.
I think that is a great way, and to build those relationships across, across EDA lines. I call it silo busting, because one of the things that really came out from the conversations with EDAs, unless you are in an EDA that has been really, really active for years and is well known, has made those connections to some of the EDAs in your area, or you're in Ontario, or you've been organizing regionally, most EDAs are in a little silo, and they don't even talk to the people who are in the EDAs around them. And that's a shame, because there's a tremendous amount that we can learn from each other and support each other. Especially with volunteers. Volunteers will come and go because you have other things going on in your life, and you have different energy levels, and you have to make sure you don't get PTSD. You have to make sure that you take care of yourself. So volunteers come and go. And so it's really important that we aren't depending on one or two people, that we really need to have a larger, broader base that are trained, that can rotate through and through the different executive positions, training, cross-training, and having more members coming in all the time to be growing that leadership from within. I think it was very disturbing when people started throwing out ideas for who they thought should be our new leader, and they were throwing out names like David Suzuki and Naomi Klein, which are all fabulous people who are doing amazing things in their own area, but they're not Greens and they're not political. So why are we not looking from within our own party to grow the leadership from within our own party? I've always looked at it that I haven't done my job as a manager of a business unless I have an exit strategy and I have my replacement trained and ready to take over the minute, and have everything they need the minute I step away. And I think we need to be looking at that in that light, not consolidating power or holding on to personal power, because that's not what it's about. We're in this for not ourselves. We're in it for, the work that needs to be done and that we need to collectively do to achieve the changes that each of us know absolutely has to happen if we're going to survive as a civilization. And that 14 years is now 10 years, is now 8 years, and it's receding a whole lot faster than the calendars going forward. So, those feedback loops and everything else are kicking in. Things are melting faster than the scientists expected. So the amount of time we have to take action is less and less all the time. So we have to, actually one place I worked, I put a basket and I said, ego's here, and put a little arrow down. So you didn't come into the room until you left your ego in the basket outside the door. And if you'd forgotten that, I'd let you know. Because it just gets in the way. It absolutely gets in the way. And we're all human beings, and we work on instinct sometimes, but we have to have control of ourselves to be able to let those things go and really do be working towards a common goal.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome.
Avra?
Yeah. Quite a few things that you're hitting. I'm like right there, like silo busting. Please, let's get rid of the silos. Communication, this idea of having some continuity between the EDAs and supporting EDAs, and this chain across the world and bringing all the Greens together. Like, why not? I think it's a really good idea. How to actually do it is another story, but I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think part of what when you were talking about you know, the membership having an influence on the policies and how to actually really bring that to fruition. You know, we're having a bit of an ideological, it's like there's a war going on within the party right now, and we have a sect of the party that's like talking about socialism, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, do we have to get into this? Like, do we need this right now? Don't we have enough to contend with without trying to figure out who we are ideologically? And I kind of was just wondering, like, you're running as a leader. What are you going to respond to this part of the membership?
Well, first off, you know, we have a big tent. We have a goal that really speaks to a lot of people who fit all across that left-right spectrum. I actually don't like the left-right spectrum. I think we've moved beyond that. We're more of an axial shift where we, in order to have a wellness economy, you need to have an expansive aspect to that as well. So Google axial shift, and you'll get some really cool information about that. It is, but it's more about the right solution for the issue. And the problem with allowing yourself to have a label, a single label, is that if the right solution doesn't come out of that box with that label, then you will have less support in using that solution. I would rather find the absolute best solution. I don't care where it comes from. It could come behind the bathroom door. But if that's the best solution for the problem, then that's the one that we as a party need to use. Let the historians figure out where we fell on the spectrum. You know, I think that that decision could probably be made on a per policy basis, but not as a whole. I think of it in terms of as a whole food plant-based chef and as a nutrition coach, people will eat a meal that might be vegan, or they may eat a meal that's pescatarian or a carnivore meal, but rarely are they 100% one thing. You know, you at different points in time, you do things or have solutions or meals that can have a label on them, but to say 100% all the time, very, very unusual and too constraining, quite frankly. I find labels, I don't like labels. I find them very, very constraining because really it should be about finding the best solution and not only being able to choose it from one box. So I have very little patience when people get into those ideological arguments, and it's wonderful if that's how they see themselves. You know, that's awesome, but I don't think the complexity of the party that is wanting to be inclusive enough with so many different people coming from different backgrounds that we can fit ourselves into a single box. Okay. And I'm not being elusive, but I'm being quite honest in that it needs to be solutions based. I know it sounds like such a political answer, doesn't it?
Well, you know, there's a membership, right?
Yep.
There's a membership, and there's a faction of the membership who are very, you know, they've romanticized this idea, and we still have to have an answer for those people. Like, how do we engage that end of the spectrum without becoming caught up in the dichotomies like that?
Exactly.
So
exactly. Yeah. So what I like to say is, okay, well, what is your position on, you know, public housing? You know, so somebody who's far right is going to have a very different perspective than somebody who's far left. But what is the best, like, what is the problem with not having affordable housing? So that's the problem we're trying to solve. So what is the best solution to that? You know, and the funny thing is that you can read books upon books upon books, and the best way to solve homelessness is to provide somebody a home. You know, so it isn't as complicated as we make it out to be sometimes. So we have to really look beyond these left-right ideologies. And one of the things that's really becoming clear, especially with the current version of the Conservatives, is that they have a fundamental belief that human beings have to be forced to work, that their only worth is in the work product that they create, And if they do not work, then they are useless. That may be a little harsh, but that's really, if you listen to the rhetoric, that's what it is. People on the far left look at human beings as, you know, the economy should be there for the people, not the people for the economy, and that people's needs come first, and that if somebody can make a profit being respectful, then there's nothing wrong with that. But then you get people who are far left who want to completely collapse capitalism, and you know, there are wonderful other things out there. Capitalism showed that it didn't work in 2008. Like, it really collapsed. We've been limping along, not really knowing what to replace it with, quite frankly. And so that's put us in a bit of a bind. But there is some really interesting thought leaders out there as to what it should look like, including you know, Radin, what's her name? Kathleen Radin, I think it's Kathleen, with the donut economic model. There's the wellness economy that's you see in New Zealand and other places. You know, there's different ways of looking at it where people count, you know, and that the economy is there to serve the people and not the people just to provide workers for the economy. Because we really have to do something about this income inequity, where, I mean, there's nobody earns $1 billion. You know, you cannot work enough hours in a day in your whole life to earn $1 billion. Somebody else earned it for you, a worker that you weren't paying a living wage in many cases. So that's what I call predatory behavior, is when corporations are making obscene profits and they're not paying their workers a living wage, and they're not providing a healthy work environment. So it's, yeah, so pick a policy and figure out where it lands on that spectrum. But I think we're beyond the spectrum now. I know I get a little philosophical sometimes. Poor Krista, she's my official agent. She goes, great conversations, but I'm getting really sleepy.
It's late.
It is, it's late. Bless your heart, Krista. Thanks for hanging in there. Excellent. Speaking of labels, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there needs to be some rent control. Some of especially in areas where the rents are completely out of control, and housing has become a commodity to be traded, not a place to have. We're treating housing as capital, not as homes. And I don't know how we're going to back out of that, but that needs to change. We need support for cooperative housing. We need some really different ways of looking at affordable housing. Yeah, and absolutely tax the CEOs. There should be a maximum factor of how many times you're like the lowest income employee, how many times a factor that you can earn as a CEO, because there's a really interesting book that talks about when that shifted and when corporations started working to make money for their shareholders, and that was the sole reason for it. And there was some huge shifts in CEO pay, and that's when workers' rights really got thrown out the door. And we need to reverse that, because that's not sustainable, and it's not work environments that we should be having any Canadian working in.
I'm going to say goodnight, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Judy.
Thanks. No, we will get. We may not be in PEI, but we will get a chance to sit around a coffee table sometime and with a beverage of choice and talk about all these great ideas and issues for sure.
That would be great.
Excellent.
Take care,
Excellent.
everybody.
You betcha. You bet. Take care. It's like we closed down the bar tonight.
Good night. Good night.
Yeah, one or two for sure. Okay, awesome. Thank you.